Hey guys, this is Garrett Fuller with MMORPG.com. I'm here with J. Allen Brack, the production director. I got it right.
Right.
On World of Warcraft. And Jay was nice enough to sit here with us at Austin and talk a little bit about some of the upcoming changes that are coming to WoW. It's exciting because MMORPG doesn't get to talk to you guys much, so this is like almost like a first-time interview. So
Awesome.
We're excited.
Great.
So before we talk about Cataclysm, which I think is a big thing with BlizzCon, I want to talk to you about 3.3 and Arthas and Lich King and everything you guys are working on with 3.3. How's it going, basically?
We're really excited about how 3.3 is going. We're going to have the conclusion of Arthas' storyline with the raid. There'll be a 10-person regular, a 10-person heroic, a 25-person regular, a 25-person heroic version. There's a legendary weapon that we're releasing called Shadowmourne, which will be a two-handed axe. There's also going to be a new tier of gear for dungeons. We're actually releasing another tier of dungeons, so there'll be an 8-boss dungeon that players can play through, and it's really exciting.
Cool. I think it's great. I think it's a cool conclusion to the storyline. Yeah. Everybody loves the Arthas storyline.
Absolutely.
Culling of Stratholme's fun to go back and do that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite dungeons this time around.
Cool. Now, obviously, you guys have talked a lot about Cataclysm.
Sure.
One of the things I think that people might not realize, and it's something I don't know how often you get asked is why. Cataclysm. It's a different type of expansion. It's not necessarily a new continent. It's not anything. It's more. I was calling it a facelift.
Sure.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely.
In a bad way. With the volcanoes and destruction and floods. So tell us a little bit about the reasoning behind that choice.
Well, we started to have discussions right before Wrath of the Lich King shipped about what the next expansion was going to be, and I think we had a certain idea in our heads as to how that was going to go. But as we started to talk about it, it became pretty clear that we wanted to do 2 new races. So we'd done that with Burning Crusade. We weren't sure how. The Death Knight we knew was going to be good, but we didn't want to do another class back-to-back. So we pretty quickly settled on, hey, we want to do 2 new races in this expansion. Once we did that, we started thinking about doing the 1 through 20 experience for those guys, and then having them have the same 20 through 60 experience was really unappealing. That content it's good, but when you compare it to a lot of the stuff that we've done in Burning Crusade and a lot of the stuff that we've done in Lich King, the Lich King stuff and the Burning Crusade stuff is really just orders of magnitude better. We're much smarter about how we make content. We're much smarter about how we handle quests, densities, the types of quests we can do. And so the idea of having people go back through the old world was just not very appealing.
Right.
So as game developers, we're also perfectionists, and the idea of going back and saying, well, what if we could update the world? What if we could go back and actually change things such that that we could bring some of that learning, some of that Lich King knowledge into the old world? So that was also part of the motivation. On top of that, even more on top was we've got a lot of places in the world where there's mystery, like there's unrevealed pieces, and so this seemed like an opportunity for players to be able to actually adventure in Highjaw. What happened? They get to see what the zone is like now that after War 3 and and Archimonde. There's areas behind the Greymane Wall that people have always known. What is behind the Greymane Wall? Well, Cataclysm's going to let you know. So those are really some of the reasons.
No, personally, it makes sense. I mean, I've done it. I've leveled back up again, and it's fun a second time. But then you start to get to a point where it's like, do I do it? Roll a third character, and so I think changing the experience, like you said, 20 to 60 is exciting for players and
Absolutely.
New players too.
Yeah.
I mean, to bring them in. My next question, you talked about the races. I always pray for a class, but the Death Knight is keeping me happy. But talk a little bit about the Worgen Goblin. I mean, with the Draenei, it was really cool, and the Blood Elves. You kind of gave each side something that they were lacking. I always thought. Talk a little bit about the choice for the Worgen and Goblin.
So on the Goblin side, I think that's fairly simplistic to kind of understand. We did want to go. We've always talked about having Goblins as a playable race. It's always been something that the fans have requested. It's always been something that we've wanted to do. We talked a lot about different ways that we could bring them onto, what side that made sense. But Goblin is one of those races that we kind of coalesced on fairly quickly that, hey, Goblin would be something we should talk about doing. Right. Putting it onto the Horde made it a lot of sense based on the storyline that we had, and also having a smaller race to kind of complement the gnomes on the Horde side. So that's sort of the motivation behind the Goblin. The Worgen is a little more interesting story. They started out, we knew we wanted to do a race that transformed, or that was the concept, and this is what eventually became into the Worgen, so that was part of the discussion. We also kind of went down a path of having something where we said, the Forsaken are part of the Horde, but they're kind of their own thing. They've got their own agenda.
Yeah.
They're a little darker. This is sort of a compliment on the Alliance. The Worgen, they're going to have their own challenges. They're going to have their own thing that's going on. They're part of the Alliance, but there's something a little more sinister. There's a little bit more of ambiguity with the Worgen, and so it made sense for those guys to go on the Alliance as well. It was definitely something we spent many hours debating and talking about and kind of figuring out what the right answer is.
It is a tough choice. I mean, especially for Alliance. I think more so for technically good than evil. Evil, it's easy. You can come up with something quick, especially with werewolf type design. For good, you gotta. I like that you said there's a little more sinister to what they're doing. It's kind of neat. The other thing with Cataclysm that's really big is the kind of the changes of the implementation of changing the old world itself. And you said you have a huge canvas to paint on, but there's already a painting on it.
Sure.
So what's it like to kind of add certain elements, the flooding and the destruction and the elements really rising up out of the ground and.
Sure. So that's a storytelling mechanism definitely, and the motivation behind that is really to take some of the areas that haven't worked as well as we like. What we ended up doing at the very beginning is we made a list of all the zones in the game, and then we talked about what are the zones in the game that don't work from a level design perspective, and we kind of made a list. And then we said, okay, what are the zones that don't work in the game from a quest design perspective? And then we made a list. And so the ones that we feel like are the zones that are the I guess the least good or the worst zones in the game. Everyone has their most hated zone. Ashara is one of the kind of the team's most hated zones. Darkshore is one of the most hated zones in terms of flow, in terms of how the quests work, in terms of how the zones was put together. So those zones really bubbled up to the top really quickly as well. We want to really make a lot of significant changes to these zones, and the Cataclysm is sort of the storytelling mechanism that we're using to do that.
Right. It's really neat. My last one is and again. There's two sides to this, and I wanted to mention both. Talk about you're implementing some really interesting new systems into the MMO. MMOs in general are growing, and we're starting to see more elements, more things added.
Yeah.
Cataclysm is going to give you a chance to add some really neat features, with guilds and even player advancement. Talk about how you kind of look at a system and go, well, we have leveling, we have glyphs, we have talents. How else can you, what makes you make the choice to add another layer of enhancement onto a character?
Sure. Well, a lot of that motivation is wanting to further differentiate the classes, further differentiate how players play the game. We did talk about wanting to have some kind of way to customize your character, and that they're working on your character post max level. And so that's how the Path of the Titan sort of arose. It was sort of an idea that you could give players additional abilities, give players additional utility, independent from their class, a little bit more role specific and customized to their play style. So that was sort of the motivation behind that. Guild leveling, we always want to increase the value of guilds, increase the power that guilds have, and so guild leveling is something we've been talking about doing for a long time, and I'm really, that's probably the feature I'm most excited about in the expansion, is really being able to have 20 levels for your guild and all the different things that you can unlock, and just kind of do that progression as a group, not only as an individual.
It's interesting you say that, because I went to the guild panel yesterday with all the guild leaders.
Yeah.
They are ecstatic about it.
Cool.
I mean, they're hardcore guys.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
But they said anything, it is a group game. I mean, as much as, as much solo content as you can put in, and I do both, play with my guild and I'll solo.
Absolutely.
But it is neat. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is, and like I said, this goes to again, kind of differentiating the classes. I mean, it's got to be tough to balance. I mean, I always look at the tank healer DPS kind of build you guys have. Is there any plans to kind of add to that, and not necessarily enhance it, but make it easier for players to kind of define themselves in the class, to kind of, and any chances to add another class role out there? Is there something that we haven't thought of outside of the kind of the D&D system of RPGs?
We have a lot of changes to the classes that we're talking about for Cataclysm. One of the things that we're doing is introducing the mastery system. This would be a new stat. And basically, the more mastery points you have, the more it's just going to be a straight DPS increase, depending on what talent tree that you actually have the most talents in. So, if you are a rogue and you have most of your talents in assassination, that may result in additional mastery points will give you more haste or more crit or something like that. And the idea behind that is to simplify the talent trees a little bit because we really feel like they're getting a little big and a little complicated.
Yeah.
And so if we simplify those a little bit and have other ways for players to just take talents that are just straight DPS increases, the talent trees become much more about utility. They become much more about how you actually want to play the game and not about talents you have to pick up because it's additional 1% damage.
It's very true. It's very true. So, great. Jay, I can't thank you enough for chatting with us and for the viewers. They're going to love it. So
Thanks.
It's very cool. We
Appreciate
look forward to Cataclysm, but we look forward to 3.32. So,
Okay,
great.
awesome. Thanks.
Again.
Appreciate it.